I am Joshua, 30 years old, and on my 30th birthday, I saw on Instagram that my family surprised my brother with a Porsche and a trip to Paris. My mom commented, "He's the only one who makes us proud." Before I tell you about the shocking truth of where that money came from, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments. I was sitting alone at my small, scratched kitchen table in my apartment in Richmond, Virginia. The apartment was dead silent. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that makes your ears ring and forces you to listen to your own heartbeat. Right in front of me, sitting on a cheap paper plate, was a single vanilla cupcake I had picked up from the bakery down the street after work. It had a cheap, neon blue plastic candle sticking out of the center, completely unlit. I had not even bothered to search my kitchen drawers for a lighter. Outside my window, the streetlights cast long, bleak shadows through the horizontal slats of my blinds, painting prison bars across my living room floor. I had spent the last 8 years of my life working relentlessly as a pharmaceutical sales representative. It was a grueling job. I spent my days driving hundreds of miles across the state, walking into sterile clinics, waiting hours to speak to doctors for 5 minutes, pulling in decent numbers, making a living, and trying desperately to prove to my family that I existed, that I mattered, that I was worth their time. I woke up that morning with a small, foolish, completely irrational spark of hope burning in my chest. You probably know the exact feeling I am talking about. You look in the mirror while brushing your teeth and you tell yourself that you do not care, that it is just another Tuesday, that getting older is just a number. But deep down in your core, you are waiting. You are waiting for the phone in your pocket to vibrate against your leg. You are waiting for a text message to light up the screen. You are walking to the mailbox hoping to see a familiar handwriting on a card. Most of all, you are waiting for a simple, 2-minute phone call from your mother saying, "Happy birthday, honey. We love you." By 8 o'clock that evening, that spark of hope had completely burned out, leaving nothing but cold ash in my chest. My phone screen was a blank, dark rectangle. There were no missed calls. There were no unread messages. There was absolutely nothing. I let out a long, shaky breath, staring blankly at the sugary frosting on that sad little cupcake. I picked up my phone, unlocking it to mindlessly scroll through social media, desperately trying to numb the sharp, humiliating sting of being completely forgotten by the people who gave me life. I opened Instagram, and there it was, pinned right at the top of my feed, courtesy of the algorithm. It was a photo of my younger brother, Elijah. He is 26 years old. He was standing right in the middle of my parents' pristine suburban driveway. He was wearing a brand new, clearly expensive designer leather jacket, holding up 2 first-class plane tickets like he had just won an Olympic gold medal. But it was not the tickets or the jacket that caught my eye. Behind him, gleaming under the golden hour afternoon sun, was a sleek midnight blue Porsche. Elijah had this massive, triumphant, entitled grin plastered across his face, looking like a man who had never been told the word no in his entire life. The caption below the photo read, "Surprise of a lifetime, Paris tomorrow with my amazing girlfriend, and a new ride for the city when I get back. Best parents ever. #blessed #next chapter." I blinked hard. My vision actually blurred for a few seconds. My brain simply refused to process the information. I honestly thought it was a joke, or that maybe he had rented the car for a photo shoot. I tapped the picture with a trembling thumb to enlarge it. I zoomed in on the details. I saw the pristine leather seats of the car through the window. I saw the Air France logo and Charles de Gaulle Airport printed clearly on the boarding passes. It was not a joke. It was all incredibly, painfully real. I scrolled down to the comments section. Friends, distant cousins, and college buddies were leaving endless streams of fire emojis, clapping hands, and messages of congratulations. But it was the pinned comment right at the very top that felt like a physical, brutal punch straight to my gut. It was my mom. Her smiling profile picture stared right back at me. Her words, typed out deliberately for the whole world to see. "You deserve the world, sweetheart. Have the absolute best time in Paris. You're the only one who makes us proud." I stared at those specific words until the letters started to blur and lose their shape. The only one who makes us proud. My chest tightened so hard I genuinely thought I was having a heart attack. I could not pull air into my lungs. My hands started to shake with a fine, uncontrollable tremor. I did not cry. I was entirely too shocked, too hollowed out to shed a single tear. I just felt this deep, dark void open up inside my stomach, swallowing every ounce of affection I had ever held for them. Acting purely on muscle memory, I hit the call button on my mom's contact. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. I could hear the loud, overlapping, chaotic announcements of an airport terminal buzzing in the background before she even spoke a word. "Joshua? Hi," she answered. Her voice was not warm. It was not apologetic. It was rushed, annoyed, and deeply distracted. She sounded like I was a telemarketer interrupting her favorite television show. "Listen, I'm at the airport with your brother helping him check his bags. Can I call you back?" I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning stark white. I forced the words out of my throat. "It's my birthday, Mom." There was a pause. A heavy, suffocating, dead silence on the line, masked only by the sound of a heavy suitcase rolling rapidly across the tile floor in the background. "Oh," she said. Her tone did not shift even a fraction of an inch. There was no sudden gasp of realization. There was no stammering apology. There was no guilt, right? "Happy birthday. Listen, we are literally at the gate and they are about to board. I will call you later this week. Okay, bye." Click. She hung up on me, just like that. I slowly lowered the phone from my ear and set it face down on the table. I looked at the cupcake again. I looked at the dark street outside my window. And then, something deep inside my psychological framework just snapped. It was not a loud, dramatic break. It was a quiet, cold, and permanent shift. The desperate, approval-seeking, people-pleasing son died right there in that kitchen chair, and someone entirely different woke up. I pushed my chair back and opened my laptop. The bright blue light of the screen illuminated the dark kitchen, casting harsh shadows on the walls. I bypassed my personal banking app and went straight to the web portal for the joint account. This was the account my name was on alongside my parents'. The account I had been faithfully, blindly, and automatically depositing a large chunk of my salary into for the last 6 years. I typed in the password. The loading wheel spun for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then the dashboard populated. The balance sat there in bold green font, a very healthy 5-figure number. I clicked on the transaction history tab. I started scrolling down, and as I read the line items, the blood drained completely from my face. The puzzle pieces violently snapped together. I realized in that exact moment that I had not just been forgotten by my family. I was actively being bled dry. I looked at the staggering numbers, smiled a cold, hard, unrecognizable smile to myself, and I clicked the button that said, "Withdraw." To truly understand why that specific moment at the kitchen table completely broke my psyche, you have to understand the deeply toxic dynamic of my family history. You have to understand what it is like to grow up as a ghost walking the halls of your own house. Elijah was the undisputed golden child. It was not just a subtle, unconscious parental preference. It was a fundamental religion in our household. Elijah could do absolutely no wrong. In the eyes of my parents, Elijah was the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the rest of us were simply supposed to orbit around him, soaking up whatever residual light he happened to reflect. I was always the backup plan, the safety net, the dependable, boring one they tolerated but never, ever celebrated. I remember a specific summer when I was 14 years old. I had spent 3 entire months pushing heavy metal shopping carts in the blistering, suffocating Virginia heat at the local grocery store. I worked for absolute minimum wage, coming home every night with blisters on my heels and an aching back. I saved every single dollar, every quarter, every dime, stuffing it meticulously into a battered Nike shoebox hidden under my bed. I wanted to buy a used, manual-focus vintage camera I had seen sitting in the window of a pawn shop downtown. I loved photography. To a lonely kid, Looking through a lens was the only way I knew how to capture the chaotic world and make it hold still long enough to make sense of it. The day I finally counted the cash and realized I had enough, I ran all the way to the shop and bought it. I sprinted the 2 miles back to my house, my lungs burning, clutching that heavy metal camera to my chest like it was a solid gold trophy. I burst through the front door, practically vibrating with a level of excitement I had never felt before. I ran to the kitchen to show my parents what my hard work had achieved. But the timing was catastrophically wrong. Elijah, who was 10 years old at the time, was sitting at the kitchen table, sobbing uncontrollably over a middle school math test. He had failed it, not because the material was too difficult for him, but because he had spent the entire weekend playing video games instead of opening his textbook. My parents were hovering over him like he had just suffered a devastating physical injury. My dad had his arm wrapped tightly around Elijah's shoulders. "Look," I said, holding up the camera, unable to read the room. "I finally got it. I saved enough from the grocery store." My mom barely turned her head. She glanced at the camera for a fraction of a second, her eyes narrowing into a harsh glare. "Joshua, not now. Can't you see your brother is incredibly upset? Put that stupid thing away and go up to your room." "But I worked for 3 whole months." "I said go to your room," my dad barked, his voice echoing off the kitchen tiles. He immediately turned his attention back to Elijah, his voice dropping to a gentle coo. "It's okay, buddy. We'll hire you a private tutor this week. And if you bring that math grade up to a B by the end of the month, we'll buy you that new gaming tablet you wanted." I stood there frozen for a second. The heavy camera in my hands suddenly felt like a useless brick. I turned around, walked slowly up the stairs to my bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. I did not take a single picture that day, or the next. That moment became the unwritten blueprint of our entire lives. When Elijah failed, he got a massive reward and endless sympathy. When I succeeded, I got told to be quiet and disappear. I learned to be invisible. I learned to ask for absolutely nothing. But 6 years ago, that dynamic shifted in a way that financially and emotionally trapped me completely. I was 24 years old. I had just landed my first real corporate job in pharmaceutical sales. I was finally making decent money, feeling like I had my feet securely under me, looking forward to starting my own independent life. Then the phone rang on a Tuesday night. It was my mother, crying hysterically into the receiver. "It's your dad," she sobbed, her voice trembling with panic. "He's sick, Joshua. He's at the hospital. He needs surgery. The doctors are talking about a very long, difficult recovery. The insurance is terrible, it isn't going to cover everything. The medical bills, Joshua, we don't know what to do. We're going to lose the house." Panicked, a deep primal fear took over. Despite everything they had put me through, despite the neglect, they were still my parents. The horrifying thought of my dad lying helpless in a hospital bed, the thought of them losing their home and ending up on the street, it terrified me to my core. I dropped everything and drove straight to their house. I sat with them in the living room. My dad was sitting in his armchair, looking pale, defeated, and staring blankly at the floor. "I'll help," I said immediately. I did not even hesitate. The words left my mouth before I could analyze them. "Whatever you need. I'm making good money now. I can support you." We went to the bank the very next morning. We set up a joint account. I signed the paperwork and set up an automatic wire transfer. $500, straight out of my hard-earned paycheck on the first of every single month, deposited directly into that joint account. It was a massive chunk of my income at the time. Committing to that money meant absolutely no vacations for me. It meant driving my beat-up, rusted Honda Civic with a broken air conditioner for another 5 years. It meant eating cheap ramen noodles the entire week before payday just to make rent. But I did it. I told myself I was doing the honorable thing. It was a medical emergency fund. It was for their basic survival. They never thanked me. Not once in 6 years did they acknowledge the sacrifice. They never brought it up at Thanksgiving dinners or holidays. I just let the transfer run quietly in the background, treating it like a silent, mandatory tax on my own existence. Fast forward a few years. I was at a local hardware store trying to find a wrench to fix a leaking sink in my apartment because I couldn't afford a plumber. I turned the corner of the plumbing aisle and practically ran right into Dave. Dave was an old family friend and a local certified public accountant who had handled my parents' taxes for decades. "Joshua, good to see you, son," Dave said, shaking my hand vigorously. "How's the family? How's your dad feeling these days?" "He's doing much better, Dave, thanks for asking," I said, leaning on my shopping cart. "It was a really rough patch with that surgery a few years back, but we're managing the medical debt as best as we can." Dave frowned. He tilted his head, looking at me with genuine confusion. "Medical debt? What medical debt, Joshua?" I paused, feeling a strange flutter in my chest. The surgery, the hospital bills, the out-of-pocket costs for his recovery. Dave chuckled a little, shaking his head dismissively. "Joshua, your dad's insurance covered almost everything. He had a fantastic premium policy grandfathered in through his old union. His total out-of-pocket for that entire hospital stay was barely $2,000. I did the tax write-offs for them myself that year. They didn't have any crippling debt." I felt the concrete floor drop completely out from under my feet. The fluorescent lights of the hardware store suddenly seemed to buzz 10 times louder. The wrench in my hand felt heavy. "Are you absolutely sure, Dave?" "Positive," he said, completely oblivious to the massive bomb he had just casually dropped on my life. "Anyway, good to see you. Tell your folks I said hi." I had pushed that conversation deep into the back of my mind. I did not want to believe it. The human brain does incredible things to protect itself from trauma. I made endless excuses for them. I told myself Dave was mistaken, or that he was just a bad accountant, or that there were other hidden bills he simply didn't know about. I lived in deliberate denial, until the night of my 30th birthday. After my mom hung up on me at the airport, I downloaded the PDF statements from that joint account. I sat at my kitchen table, the blue glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes, and I went line by agonizing line, month by month, year by year, 6 years, $500 a month, $36,000 of my money. I looked closely at where the money actually went. There were no hospital payments to be found. There were no pharmacy charges. There were no physical therapy bills. Instead, I saw a charge for $4,000 to a luxury travel agency in Miami. I saw $1,500 spent at high-end designer boutiques. I saw massive, multi-thousand-dollar withdrawals at the exact start of every single college semester, perfectly matching Elijah's tuition and housing gaps. It was like they were tapping into a massive, secret college fund that I was being forced to supply with my own blood and sweat. And then, I saw the most recent transactions. 3 weeks ago, a massive $10,000 wire transfer straight out of the account. The memo line on the bank statement read clearly, "Porsche down payment," followed closely by another massive charge for Air France. I felt physically sick. My stomach violently churned. I pushed my chair away from the table and paced the small kitchen, my breathing shallow and fast. I grabbed the edge of the granite counter, my knuckles turning stark white. They had not just lied to me. They had maliciously manipulated my empathy. They used my deep-seated fear of losing my father to bankroll my golden child brother's lavish lifestyle. All those Friday nights I stayed in my apartment staring at the wall because I couldn't afford a $10 beer with my coworkers. All the times I panicked and lost sleep over a flat tire. All while my parents were treating Elijah like absolute royalty, using my money to fund the illusion of their wealth. I walked back to the laptop. I did not hesitate this time. My hands were perfectly steady. I initiated a transfer. I moved the entire remaining balance of $36,000 back into my personal, strictly private checking account. Took exactly 4 clicks of the mouse. The balance on the joint account refreshed and went down to 0. I closed the laptop with a satisfying snap. The silence in the apartment felt completely different now. It didn't feel lonely or oppressive anymore. It felt like the crisp, clean air of freedom. The next morning, I woke up with a strange, hard, unshakable resolve in my chest. I didn't just want my money back. I wanted to fundamentally change the trajectory of my life. I went to work at the pharmaceutical company. During my lunch break, I stood by the coffee machine in the break room with my coworker, Sarah. Sarah had been my closest sounding board for years. She knew the entire dark history of my family dynamic. "You look different today," Sarah said, eyeing me over the rim of her coffee mug. "You look awake, like you finally slept for the first time in a decade." "I took it back," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. "All of it. The money from the joint account." Sarah's eyes widened to the size of saucers. She actually choked slightly on her coffee, coughing into a napkin. "Joshua, are you seriously telling me this? How much was in there?" 36 grand. She stared at me, her jaw slightly dropped. "What are you going to do?" "I'm investing it," I said, a real smile forming on my face. "In me." For months, I had been staring at a brochure for an advanced medical billing and administration certification. It was an intensive, highly respected, elite program that cost $8,000 up front. It was a golden ticket to get out of the grueling sales field and into the high-paying, stable hospital administration sector. I had always talked myself out of applying because I was too terrified of dipping into my savings and failing to keep my parents' fake emergency fund padded. That exact afternoon, sitting in my car during my lunch break, I logged onto the program's website and paid the $8,000 tuition in full. I drove to a department store and bought myself a sharp, tailored Navy suit for future executive interviews. I took the first real, tangible steps toward building a massive, impenetrable wall between myself and the toxic people who raised me. I knew a massive storm was coming. I knew my parents would not just let this go quietly. But for the very first time in my entire life, I was not afraid of the rain. I was ready to stand in it. The storm hit exactly 3 days later, just as I predicted. I was sitting on my living room sofa, a highlighter in hand, intensely reviewing the thick syllabus for my new medical billing course. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Suddenly, my phone violently vibrated across the glass coffee table, shattering the peace. The caller ID flashed brightly, "Dad." I stared at the screen for a long moment. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I took a deep, steadying breath, bracing my core like I was preparing for a physical blow, and I picked up the phone. "Hello," I said, my voice completely flat. "Joshua, what the hell is going on?" My dad's voice exploded through the speaker. It was frantic, loud, and pitched higher than I had ever heard it. He sounded like a man who had just realized his parachute had a massive hole in it while falling from an airplane. "I just logged in to pay the quarterly property taxes, and the joint account is completely empty. The bank representative said the entire balance was transferred to your personal account. Was there a hack? Did you accidentally freeze the funds?" I leaned back heavily into the cushions of my sofa. I deliberately kept my voice perfectly level. The absolute calmness in my tone was the ultimate weapon against his chaos. "There was no hack, Dad. I withdrew the funds. All of it. It's my money." Dead silence fell on the other end of the line. It was so quiet I could almost hear the rusted gears grinding in his head as he processed what I just said. You took it?" he stammered, the initial panic rapidly and predictably turning into a boiling rage. "Joshua, you log into your portal and put that money back this exact second. That is our family emergency fund. We were counting on that money to survive." "Emergency," I repeated, letting out a sharp, bitter, humorless laugh that echoed in the quiet room. "Is a first-class luxury trip to Paris considered an emergency now, Dad? Is a $10,000 down payment on a midnight blue Porsche an emergency?" He froze. His breathing became heavy and ragged into the receiver. He knew he was caught. You don't understand the full picture. Elijah has been working so incredibly hard at his college courses. He has been under a lot of stress. He needed a break. Your mother and I just wanted to do something special for him to celebrate him landing his new unpaid internship. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might actually crack. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of his words was staggering. To celebrate his internship? With my money? You looked me in the eye 6 years ago and lied to me about crippling medical bills. You actively manipulated my fear of you dying to fund his lavish lifestyle, while I scraped by eating garbage and driving a dangerous car. That is family money, he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. You are being incredibly selfish and vindictive. We are your parents. We raised you. You owe us respect and you owe us that financial safety net. I owe you absolutely nothing, I said. My voice dropped an octave, turning into pure ice. I spent 6 years paying a monthly ransom to a family that doesn't even have the decency to remember my 30th birthday. Do not ever call me to ask for another dime. I pulled the phone away from my ear and hit the red end button. I went into the settings and blocked his number immediately. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a sledgehammer trying to break out. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, but not from fear or intimidation. It was pure, unadulterated, electrifying adrenaline. I had finally, after 30 years of submission, stood up for myself. But I knew my mother was not going to let it end with a hung-up phone call. She was a different kind of adversary. The very next morning, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was typed in aggressive all caps. Urgent, disgusting family behavior. I opened it, reading her words out loud to the empty room to strip them of their power. Joshua, I cannot even begin to believe the level of selfishness, cruelty, and pure malice you are displaying right now. Taking that money is essentially theft from the people who gave you life. You knew perfectly well that we had extensive plans for Elijah's future. You knew how important this trip to Europe was for his cultural development. You have completely ruined the joyful atmosphere of his vacation. He is sitting in a hotel in Paris right now, crying and worried sick about us because of what you did. I demand that you wire the money back to the joint account by the end of business today, and I expect a full, groveling written apology sent to your brother. If you refuse to do this, you are single-handedly tearing this family apart, and we will never forgive you. I stared at the glowing screen. I analyzed the text. She didn't deny a single accusation. She didn't offer a shred of an apology for lying about the medical bills. She simply doubled down on her delusion. She played the ultimate victim card. It was an absolute masterclass in narcissistic gaslighting. I hovered my fingers over the keyboard. A younger version of me would have written a 10-page essay trying to explain my feelings, begging for her to understand my pain. But I knew she wouldn't care. I typed exactly 2 sentences. The ATM is permanently closed. Tell Elijah I hope he enjoys the Porsche. I hit send. I immediately felt a massive, suffocating weight lift completely off my shoulders. I was officially done negotiating with emotional terrorists. I channeled all of my anger and energy entirely into the medical billing course. The classes were incredibly intense, held twice a week in the late evenings at a local community college campus. The fluorescent-lit room was filled with exhausted people trying desperately to pivot their careers, people hungry for a second chance at life. That is where I met Patricia. Patricia was a tough, resilient, no-nonsense woman in her late 40s. She had rough, calloused hands from spending 20 years working the line in a packaging factory that had recently shut down and outsourced its labor. She was raising 2 teenage boys entirely by herself, fighting tooth and nail to master this complex billing software so she could secure a stable desk job with actual health benefits. Because we were both older than the standard students, we naturally gravitated toward each other and ended up as study partners. One rainy evening, we were sitting in a brightly lit diner across from the college after a brutal 3-hour lecture on insurance coding. I was highly distracted, stirring my black coffee aimlessly, staring blankly at the tabletop. The relentless emotional fallout with my parents was weighing heavily on my mind. Patricia noticed immediately. She closed her heavy textbook with a loud thud. "All right, spit it out," she said, looking right through me with her sharp brown eyes. "You've been carrying a massive storm cloud over your head all week. You missed 3 questions on the practice quiz. What's eating you alive?" I hesitated for a moment, not used to sharing my burdens. But then, the dam broke, and it all came pouring out. I told her everything. I told her about the joint account, the fake medical bills, the Porsche, the Paris trip, and the completely unhinged email from my mother. I told her how deeply guilty I felt, explaining the residual, deeply ingrained conditioning of a lifetime of being told I was a selfish, bad son. Patricia did not sugarcoat her response. She pointed a greasy French fry directly at my face like it was a weapon. Joshua, you need to listen to me very carefully. Blood makes you related by a genetic accident. Loyalty and respect are what make you family. They treated you like a walking, talking bank vault. You feel guilty right now because you actually have a good, functioning heart. But you cannot continually set yourself on fire just to keep toxic people warm. She took a bite of her food, chewing thoughtfully before continuing. Listen, my ex-husband tried to absolutely clean me out during our divorce. He tried to take my meager life savings. He tried to leverage the custody of my own kids just to get me to pay off his massive gambling debts. I had to hire a vicious shark of a lawyer to stop him from destroying my life. You have to treat this situation exactly the same way. You have to draw a hard, impenetrable line in the sand. Protect your future, because they sure as hell won't. Her words hit me like a splash of freezing cold water to the face. She was absolutely right. What I was going through felt exactly like a bitter divorce. A necessary, messy divorce from my own toxic parents. Walking out of that diner, I felt stronger. I felt invincible, almost. But that false sense of security led me to make a critical, almost devastating error in judgment a few days later. I received a casual text message from my cousin, Jake. Jake was my dad's nephew. We had always been relatively friendly growing up, playing video games in the basement at Thanksgiving, shooting hoops in the driveway during summer barbecues. He sent a message saying he was in town for a work conference and wanted to grab a beer to catch up. I thought, incredibly naively, that maybe word had spread through the family grapevine and he was reaching out to check on my well-being. We met at a loud, crowded sports bar downtown. The heavy smell of stale beer, fried wings, and floor cleaner filled the air. We clinked our heavy glass mugs together, and Jake immediately put on his most concerned, sympathetic face. Man, I heard through the grapevine about the massive blowout with your folks, Jake said, shaking his head sadly, taking a sip of his beer. Auntie is running around calling everyone, completely losing her mind. I think it's absolutely crazy they bought Elijah that expensive car. You have every single right to be furious, man. I'm on your side. I let my guard down completely. The cold beer warmed my stomach, and it felt so incredibly validating to have someone from the inside of the family acknowledge my pain. I leaned in over the sticky wooden table, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. It's just insane, Jake, I said, venting my frustration. But honestly, it is the absolute best thing that ever happened to me. I took the money back. I enrolled in this elite hospital administration course, and it is already paying off big time. I have a final, round 3 interview next week at the VCU Medical Center for a senior billing director role. It comes with a massive salary bump. They're talking $75,000 a year to start, plus full benefits and performance bonuses. Jake's eyebrows shot up to his hairline. His eyes widened significantly. 75 grand? Wow, that's serious money, Joshua. Good for you, man. Seriously, you deserve a win after all this. We finished our drinks, talked about sports for a while, and parted ways amicably. I walked out to my car feeling great, feeling like I finally had an ally. But as I pulled out of the parking lot and waited at a red light, I glanced casually into my rearview mirror. I saw Jake standing under the dim glow of a street lamp, his face illuminated by the bright screen of his phone. He was typing furiously, a smirk on his face. I didn't know it in that exact moment, but he wasn't texting a friend or his wife. He was texting my mother. He was handing them my exact salary figures. He was painting a massive bullseye on my back, giving them a brand new, highly lucrative target. The morning of my final interview at the Virginia Commonwealth University Medical Center finally arrived. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, my stomach tied in tight, anxious knots. I took a hot shower, shaved carefully, and put on the new tailored navy suit I had bought with my recovered funds. I stood in front of the full-length mirror on my closet door and stared. I did not recognize the guy staring back at me. He looked sharp. He looked capable. He looked authoritative. He didn't look like a forgotten backup plan anymore. The hospital was a massive, sprawling, intimidating complex of reflective glass and cold steel. I walked into the plush executive wing, my dress shoes clicking authoritatively against the polished marble floors. I was ushered by an assistant into a massive corner office that offered a sweeping, panoramic view of the city skyline. Sitting behind a massive, imposing mahogany desk was Mr. Sterling, the vice president of finance for the entire hospital system. He was an older, distinguished man with sharp, assessing eyes, wearing a perfectly pressed, expensive gray suit. "Joshua, please have a seat," he said, standing up and extending a firm, dry hand. "I've been thoroughly reviewing your test scores from the advanced certification program, and I've looked deeply into your background in pharmaceutical sales. I have to say, your aggressive, no-nonsense approach to revenue cycle management is exactly the kind of energy this department desperately needs right now." The interview lasted for over an hour. It was not just a standard question-and-answer session. It evolved into a high-level, intense strategy discussion. I felt completely, surprisingly in my element. I laid out a comprehensive plan to recover heavily denied insurance claims, using aggressive tactics I had learned to deal with corporate lawyers and stubborn insurance adjusters. Mr. Sterling raised his eyebrows in genuine, unhidden respect. "You're remarkably sharp, Joshua," he said as we finally wrapped up, organizing the papers on his desk. "I like your drive. You have a hunger I don't see often. I will be in touch with you very soon." I walked out of the hospital feeling like I was literally floating on air. The heavy, oppressive Virginia humidity hitting me as I exited the sliding doors couldn't even touch my good mood. I got into my car, took a deep, exhilarating breath, and finally pulled my phone out of my pocket to check my notifications. My heart instantly dropped from my chest straight down into my stomach. There were 14 missed calls glaring on the screen. 4 from my mom, 10 from my dad, and a new, unread email sitting at the top of my inbox. I opened the email with trembling fingers. The subject line was terrifying. "Absolute emergency. Please answer US. Joshua, we are in a catastrophic, life-altering situation. Your father's logistics company just executed a massive, unexpected round of layoffs this morning, and he lost his job. His severance package is minimal. Furthermore, we have a massive balloon payment due on the house mortgage next week that we hid from you. Without his income, and without the emergency fund you selfishly took from us, the bank is going to begin foreclosure proceedings immediately. We are going to be out on the street. Jake told us you are getting a huge new executive job making $75,000 a year. You have to help us. Please, Joshua. We are begging you on our hands and knees. You can afford to save this family now." I gripped the leather steering wheel so hard the material actually groaned under the pressure. Jake, that miserable, backstabbing coward. He had played me for an absolute fool at the sports bar just to gather financial intel to feed back to my mother. And my dad actually lost his job. The timing was almost unbelievably cruel. A wave of intense panic flared in my chest. Foreclosure, homelessness, the ingrained, rigorously trained guilt of 30 years rose up in my throat like bitter bile. "They are your parents." A voice in my head whispered. "You have to save them. You have the money now. It's your duty." I picked up the phone, my hands slick with sweat. I called Sarah. She answered on the second ring. "Sarah, I need you to talk me off a ledge right now," I said, my voice shaking uncontrollably. There was a heavy, loaded silence on the line. I could hear her breathing. Then, Sarah's voice came through, incredibly calm, hard as diamond, and entirely unforgiving. "Joshua, do not send them a single, solitary dime. But they might actually lose the house, Sarah. They'll be on the street. They bought a Porsche, Joshua." She practically yelled into the phone, her anger slicing through my panic. They bought a luxury sports car and a first-class vacation to France with your blood money. If they are facing foreclosure, they can sell the damn Porsche to a dealership today. They can sell the big house, downsize to an apartment, and get retail jobs. Their horrific financial mismanagement is not your cross to bear. They are grown adults. Let them fall and hit the ground. I closed my eyes. I pressed my hot forehead against the cool steering wheel. She was right. Every single word she said was objectively, undeniably right. If I bailed them out of this disaster now, I would be their financial prisoner for the rest of my natural life. You're right, I whispered into the phone. I'm not doing it. I'm done. I hung up. I did not reply to the email. I put the car in drive, pulled out of the hospital parking lot, and drove home in silence. That exact evening, as the sun was setting, the phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something told me to answer it. It was Mr. Sterling himself. Joshua, I don't usually move this incredibly fast, but I spoke with the hospital board this afternoon. We want you on the team. The position is yours if you want it. The base salary is officially $75,000, with a generous performance bonus structure and full benefits. Can you put in your notice and start in 2 weeks? Yes, sir, I said. A massive, genuine, ear-to-ear smile breaking across my face for the first time in weeks. I absolutely can. Thank you. I had done it. I had pulled myself completely out of the dirt. But the universe, it seemed, was not quite done testing my resolve. The very next evening, I was standing in my kitchen cooking a celebratory steak dinner for myself when there was a loud, aggressive, frantic knock at my apartment door. I froze. I walked quietly to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Elijah. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open, leaving the chain on. He stood there in the dimly lit hallway, looking completely disheveled and frantic. The designer leather jacket from the Instagram photo was nowhere to be seen. He was wearing a wrinkled college hoodie. His hair was a mess, and his eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. He didn't look like the untouchable golden child anymore. He looked like a terrified, panicked kid who just realized the world was not a playground. "What do you want, Elijah?" I asked, my voice cold, blocking the doorway with my body. I was absolutely not going to let him step foot inside my sanctuary. "Joshua, please," he said, his voice cracking with desperation. "Mom and Dad are completely losing their minds. Dad got fired yesterday. They sat me down and told me you maliciously stole all of their life savings out of spite, and now the bank is going to take the house. They said you're actively trying to ruin us because you're jealous of my trip." I let out a harsh, incredulous laugh that echoed down the hallway. "I stole their life savings? Is that the story they're spinning to you?" "Yes. They said you hacked the joint account out of pure, vindictive spite just because they bought me a car for my birthday." I unhooked the chain and opened the door wider, crossing my arms over my chest. I looked at him, really looked deeply at him. A week ago, I was ready to tear him apart with my bare hands. I was ready to scream at him for Paris, for the Porsche, for every single unfair, heartbreaking moment of our miserable childhoods. But as I stared into his terrified, utterly confused eyes, I realized a horrifying truth. He actually didn't know. He was completely clueless. "Elijah," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously calm whisper, "where exactly do you think the money for that Porsche came from?" He blinked, looking genuinely confused. "From Mom and Dad's investment portfolio. Dad told me they cashed out some high-yield stocks that matured." "There are no stocks, Elijah," I said. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, opened the banking app, pulled up the PDF of the historical statement, and aggressively shoved the screen right into his face. "Look at it. Look at the deposit columns. Every single month. $500. Transferred straight from my corporate payroll account. For 6 entire years. They told me Dad was dying and they needed help with medical bills to save his life. I funded that account. That was my money, Elijah. They took my survival money to buy you a luxury car while I was driving a rusted-out Honda with no air conditioning." Elijah stared at the glowing screen. His eyes darted rapidly back and forth across the undeniable numbers. His face went completely pale, draining of all color until he looked sick. He scrolled down with a trembling finger, stopping exactly on the massive withdrawal labeled for his car down payment. He slowly handed the phone back to me, his hands physically shaking. I swear to God, Joshua, I didn't know. I never, ever would have taken the keys to that car or gotten on that plane if I knew it was your money. I swear on my life. I looked at him. The boiling anger in my chest flickered and suddenly changed shape. He was spoiled, yes. He was deeply entitled, absolutely. But he wasn't inherently evil. He was just a pawn in my parents' twisted, lifelong game of favoritism, systematically groomed since childhood to accept whatever golden trophies they handed him without ever questioning the cost. I know you didn't, I said softly, the anger draining out of my voice. Elijah ran a shaking hand through his messy hair, pacing the small space in the hallway. This is insane. They lied to both of us. They set you up to hate me, and they set me up to look like a greedy parasite. He stopped pacing and looked at me, his jaw setting with a newfound, rigid determination I had never seen in him before. I'm giving the car back to the dealership tomorrow morning. I'm packing my bags and moving out of their house. I'm not playing their sick game anymore. For the very first time in my 30 years of life, I looked at my younger brother and felt a genuine sense of pride. Good, I said simply. But as he turned around and walked heavily away down the hall, I knew in my gut this wasn't the end. Elijah turning his back on them was going to ignite a massive powder keg. And my mother, desperate, broke, and backed into a corner with a foreclosure looming over her head, was about to do something completely, publicly unhinged. I locked my door, entirely unaware that the real, explosive confrontation was just days away. The fallout from Elijah moving out did not take long to reach my doorstep. My mother, entirely stripped of her favorite child and staring down the barrel of a bank foreclosure, decided to go to war. She did not choose to handle it privately. She chose the most public, humiliating arena possible. I was sitting at my desk at my old job, finishing up my final week before starting at the hospital, when my phone started vibrating off the wood. It was not a phone call. It was a relentless, machine gun barrage of Facebook notifications. I unlocked the screen. My mother had posted a massive, multi-paragraph status update. She tagged me right at the top so it would appear on my timeline for all my friends and colleagues to see. I read the words and my blood ran ice cold. Sometimes, the children you sacrifice everything for turn out to be your greatest heartbreak. Your father and I have worked our fingers to the bone to provide a loving, stable home. But when times get tough, you truly see who people are. We are facing a severe financial crisis due to an unexpected job loss. Instead of helping his family, Joshua has chosen pure greed. He maliciously drained our family emergency account out of petty jealousy over a gift we gave his younger brother. He is leaving his parents to face foreclosure and homelessness while he brags about a massive new salary. We raised him better than this, praying he finds his conscience before he destroys this family forever. I sat in my office chair, staring at the screen. Below her post, the comments were already pouring in. Distant relatives, women from her church group, and neighbors were validating her delusion. They were calling me a disgrace. They were telling her to stay strong. A year ago, I would have panicked. I would have deleted my account, hid in my apartment, and let her control the narrative. I would have felt the crushing weight of public shame and probably written her a check just to make it stop. But I was not that guy anymore. I was done being the family punching bag. I cracked my knuckles, placed my fingers on the keyboard, and hit reply. I didn't write an emotional plea. I wrote a surgical strike. Mom, you and Dad sat me down 6 years ago and told me Dad was dying. You said you were drowning in medical debt and needed my help to survive. I set up an automatic wire transfer and deposited $500 of my own paycheck into your account every single month for 6 years. $36,000. I ate cheap noodles and drove a broken car to keep you afloat. Last week, I checked the bank statements. There was no medical debt. Dave the accountant confirmed it. Instead, you used my $36,000 to pay for luxury vacations, designer clothes, a massive secret college fund for Elijah, and last month, a $10,000 down payment on a Porsche for his birthday. I didn't drain your account. I took my stolen money back. If you are facing foreclosure, sell the Porsche. Do not ever publicly tag me in your lies again. I hit enter. I pinned my own comment to the top of the thread. Then I closed the app and went back to work. The explosion was instantaneous. Within 20 minutes, my phone was ringing so much the battery started draining. The comments section turned into an absolute war zone. My Aunt Linda, my dad's sister who had always been quiet but observant, replied directly to my mother, "Is this true? Did you really take his money for a car?" My mother deleted the entire post 10 minutes later. But the damage was done. The truth was out there. The pristine image she had carefully curated for decades was completely shattered. That evening, I got a text from my dad. It was completely different from his usual aggressive tone. It was submissive, pleading. "Joshua, please. The Facebook post was a mistake. Your mother is acting out of pure panic. We need to sit down like adults and figure this out. Uncle Robert is in town. He wants to mediate a dinner between us. Friday night, Capital Steakhouse. Please be there. We want to make this right." Uncle Robert, my dad's older brother. He was a wealthy real estate developer, the patriarch of the extended family, and a man who prided himself on solving family disputes. If Robert was involved, it meant my parents were truly desperate. They were bringing in the big guns to pressure me. I texted back one word, "Fine." Then I called Elijah. He had been crashing on a friend's couch since he left the house. "They want to sit down on Friday," I told him. "Uncle Robert is mediating. I want you there." "I'll be there," Elijah said without missing a beat. "I have your back." Friday night arrived. I walked into the dimly lit, expensive steakhouse wearing my new navy suit. I spotted them at a large, round booth in the back. My mother looked awful. Her makeup was thick, but it couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. My dad looked deflated, staring into a glass of bourbon. Uncle Robert sat at the head of the table, wearing a sharp blazer, looking like a judge ready to hand down a sentence. I slid into the booth next to Elijah. My mother refused to make eye contact with me. "Joshua," Uncle Robert said, extending a hand. I shook it. His grip was entirely too tight, a classic intimidation tactic. "Glad you could make it. Let's get straight to business. No yelling, no emotions, just facts." "I love facts, Robert," I said smoothly. "Your parents are in a very tight spot," Robert began, folding his hands on the table. "Your dad lost his job. The mortgage is underwater. They have a massive balloon payment due in exactly 5 days. If they don't pay it, the bank starts foreclosure. Now, I understand there is some serious bad blood regarding how they managed the joint account. I understand you feel slighted." "Slighted?" I interrupted, my voice sharp. "They lied about medical bills to siphon $36,000 from me to buy a luxury car. That's not a slight. That's financial abuse." My mother flinched as if I had physically struck her. "We gave you a roof over your head for 18 years, she hissed. "Quiet," Robert snapped at her. He turned his cold eyes back to me. "Be that as it may, Joshua, family is family. We do not let our own end up on the street. I have reviewed their financials. They are tapped out. The Porsche has been voluntarily repossessed by the dealership because they couldn't make the first monthly payment, and they lost the $10,000 deposit." I looked at Elijah. He nodded. He had surrendered the keys himself. "So," Robert continued, pulling a thick manila folder out of his briefcase, "I am willing to personally loan them the money to save the house. However, given their current lack of income, I need a guarantor on the loan. I need someone with a verified, high-salary income to co-sign this debt agreement." He pushed the folder across the mahogany table toward me. "Jake mentioned you just landed a massive director role at VCU Medical Center making 75 grand. Congratulations. That salary makes you the perfect co-signer." I stared at the folder. Then I looked at Uncle Robert. It was a trap. The entire dinner, the mediation, the fake apologies. It was a calculated, premeditated trap. Robert didn't want to lose his own money. He was terrified they would default on his loan, so he was legally chaining me to their massive debt. If they didn't pay him, he could legally garnish my new hospital salary. They were trying to turn me into their ATM all over again, just with legal paperwork this time. I felt a cold, hard knot of pure disgust settle in my chest. I looked at my dad. He couldn't meet my eyes. I looked at my mother. She was staring at the folder like a starving wolf looking at a piece of meat. "Jake told you about my salary, huh?" I asked quietly. "Family talks, Joshua," Robert said dismissively. "Now, do you have a pen? Or do you need to borrow mine?" I didn't reach for the folder. Instead, I reached inside my suit jacket. I pulled out a stack of folded papers and tossed them right into the center of the table, right on top of Robert's loan agreement. "What's this?" Robert asked, frowning. "Those are the bank statements from the joint account," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet corner of the restaurant. "Highlighted in yellow are the thousands of dollars spent on luxury vacations. Highlighted in green is the tuition for Elijah. Highlighted in pink is the $10,000 down payment for the Porsche." I brought copies for everyone. My mother's face went completely pale. "Put those away. This is a public place. You made it public when you tried to destroy my reputation on Facebook," I said, my voice rising just enough to cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant. "You want to talk about facts, Robert? Here is a fact. They didn't just lose the house because Dad lost his job. They lost the house because they have been living a fake, wealthy lifestyle funded entirely by my panic and my paycheck. And Jake didn't just casually mention my salary. He acted like a spy, pumped me for information at a bar, and sold me out so his aunt wouldn't come begging him for money." Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He looked at the bank statements. The undeniable proof of their grotesque spending habits was right in front of his face. "Joshua, the past is the past," my dad pleaded weakly. "We are talking about our home, your childhood home." "It was never a home to me," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "It was a place where I was tolerated. Elijah was the only one who got a home. I don't want any part of this." Elijah suddenly spoke up. His voice was shaking, but he stood his ground. He looked directly at my mother. "I gave the car back. I dropped out of the expensive private college courses you forced me into. I'm going to community college and paying for it myself. You used my brother to buy my love, and it makes me sick." My mother gasped, clutching her chest. "Elijah, how can you say that to us? After everything we did for you." "You didn't do it for me," Elijah fired back. "You did it for your own ego. You wanted a trophy child to show off to the neighbors, and you made Joshua foot the bill." The table fell completely silent. The waiter who had been approaching our table with water glasses immediately turned around and walked the other way. I looked at Uncle Robert. I pushed his manila folder back across the table. It slid and hit his water glass. "I am not signing your loan, Robert," I said, my voice carrying the absolute weight of a judge rendering a final verdict. "I am not taking on their debt. I am not bailing them out. They made their bed with lies, and now they get to sleep in it. If you want to loan them money, that is your massive risk. Leave me out of it." I stood up from the booth. I buttoned my suit jacket. I looked down at the two people who brought me into this world. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt a profound, liberating emptiness. "Do not call me again," I said to my parents. "Do not email me. Do not ambush me at my apartment. If you try to contact my new employer to cause trouble, I will immediately hire a lawyer and file a harassment and extortion lawsuit against you. This is the end of the line. We are done." I turned around and walked out of the restaurant. Elijah followed right behind me. We walked out into the cool night air of the parking lot. I took a massive, deep breath, filling my lungs completely. The heavy, suffocating chain that had been wrapped around my neck for 30 years was finally, permanently broken. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment one below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The drive home from the Capitol Steakhouse was the quietest drive of my entire life, but it was a good quiet. Elijah sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. We didn't need to speak. The silence between us was no longer filled with resentment. It was filled with mutual understanding. We had both survived the same battlefield, just from different trenches. The immediate fallout over the next 2 weeks was exactly as chaotic as I expected. My mother, realizing she had completely lost control of both her sons and her narrative, spiraled into absolute desperation. She left 6 unhinged voicemails on my phone before I finally changed my number altogether. According to Aunt Linda, who called me a few days later to check in, the family had entirely fractured. "Your mother is running out of allies, Joshua," Aunt Linda told me over the phone. "She tried to hit up all the cousins for emergency loans, but after your Facebook comment, nobody wants anything to do with her finances. Uncle Robert refused to give them the personal loan without your signature. He told them they were a terrible investment." "What are they going to do?" I asked. I wasn't asking out of a desire to help, but out of pure logistical curiosity. "They have to sell," Linda said simply. "The bank gave them a grace period before the foreclosure hits the public record. They listed the house yesterday. They are going to have to sell it fast and cheap to cover the balloon payment and the negative equity on that stupid Porsche they lost the deposit on. They're looking at renting a 2-bedroom apartment out in the suburbs." I let the information wash over me. A 2-bedroom apartment. Clipping coupons. Living paycheck to paycheck. They were finally going to experience the exact same crushing financial anxiety they had forced me to live in for my entire 20s. It wasn't joyful revenge. It was just gravity. It was the undeniable law of cause and effect finally catching up to them. I started my new position as a director at the Virginia Commonwealth University Medical Center that Monday. Walking into my new office, seeing my name engraved on the heavy metal plaque on the door, was a surreal experience. I had a massive mahogany desk, a view of the city skyline, and a team of 12 billing specialists reporting directly to me. I threw myself into the work with a level of focus and energy I never knew I possessed. Without the constant, draining psychological warfare from my parents weighing me down, my mind was incredibly sharp. I restructured the denied claims department within my first 30 days. I used the aggressive negotiation tactics I learned in pharmaceutical sales to force massive insurance conglomerates to pay out claims they had been stalling on for months. Mr. Sterling noticed. He noticed everything. He would often pop his head into my office late on a Friday afternoon, holding a printed financial report. "You recovered $3 million in backlogged revenue this month, Joshua," he said one evening, looking highly impressed. "The hospital board is extremely pleased. You have a very bright future in this administration." At the end of my first month, my very first executive paycheck hit my private bank account. I sat at my kitchen table, opened my banking app, and stared at the number. It was more money in a single bi-weekly deposit than I used to make in 2 months at my old job. I didn't go out and buy a luxury car. I didn't book a trip to Paris. I logged into my student loan portal and made a massive lump sum payment. Then, I transferred a solid chunk of cash into a high-yield savings account. I was building my own fortress, brick by brick, and nobody was ever going to hold the keys but me. 6 months passed. Half a year of absolute, uninterrupted peace. It is amazing how quickly your body and mind heal when you remove the source of the poison. My chronic tension headaches completely disappeared. I started sleeping through the night without waking up in a cold sweat worrying about someone else's fake emergencies. My career at the hospital didn't just stabilize. It exploded. Because of the massive revenue I was recovering for the system, Mr. Sterling pulled me into a closed-door meeting right before the holidays. "Joshua," The deputy director of regional operations is retiring at the end of the year, Sterling told me, leaning back in his leather chair. It involves overseeing the billing departments for 3 of our satellite campuses. It comes with a significant salary bump and an executive bonus structure. The board wants you in that chair. Do you want it? I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. I'm ready. That weekend, I hosted a small celebration dinner at a fantastic Italian restaurant downtown. The guest list was very small and entirely by my own design. Sarah was there, raising her glass of wine and reminding me that she told me so. Patricia was there, taking a night off from her new, stable desk job that she secured right after finishing our course. She brought her 2 teenage boys, who ate enough garlic bread to feed an army. And Elijah was there. My relationship with my brother had undergone a massive, profound transformation. Without our parents constantly pitting us against each other, we actually discovered that we liked each other. Elijah had gotten a job working the floor at a hardware store while he attended community college at night. He was exhausted, he had calluses on his hands, and he had never looked better. After the dinner, Elijah and I walked out to the parking lot together. The cold winter air felt sharp and clean. "I'm really proud of you, man," Elijah said, leaning against the hood of my practical, reliable sedan. "Deputy Director. That's huge." "Thanks," I said. "I'm proud of you, too. You're grinding it out. It takes a lot of character to walk away from a free ride." Elijah looked down at his boots, kicking a piece of gravel. "I started going to therapy," he said quietly, "through the college campus clinic. I have a lot of garbage to unlearn, Joshua. My therapist told me I exhibit a lot of conditioned narcissistic traits. I was literally trained to believe I was superior, that the rules didn't apply to me. It's an ugly mirror to look into." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "The fact that you are looking in the mirror at all means you are breaking the cycle." Mom and Dad never looked in it once. We hugged, a real, solid, brotherly hug, and went our separate ways. The next evening, I was sitting in my apartment, reviewing some hospital files, when my phone rang. I had changed my number, so very few people had it. I didn't recognize the local caller ID. I answered it cautiously. "Hello, Joshua. Please don't hang up." It was my dad. His voice sounded entirely different. It sounded incredibly old, fragile, and utterly defeated. The blustering arrogance was completely gone. I gripped the phone, my defenses immediately raising. "How did you get this number?" "Elijah gave it to me," my dad said. "He told me not to ask you for anything, and I promise you I'm not." I stayed silent, letting him carry the weight of the conversation. "I'm working at a home improvement warehouse now," he continued, his voice wavering slightly. "Stocking shelves on the night shift. It's hard work. My knees are bad. Your mother is working the register at a grocery store. We live in a small apartment near the highway." He paused, taking a ragged breath. "I have a lot of time to think while I'm stocking those shelves at 3 in the morning, Joshua. I think about the camera you bought when you were 14. I think about the day you sat in my living room and offered to pay my medical bills without a second thought. I think about how a father is supposed to protect his son, and how I fed you to the wolves instead just to keep the peace with your mother." I closed my eyes. Hearing the admission out loud felt like a physical weight pressing on my chest. "We took you for granted," my dad choked out, clearly crying on the other end of the line. "We played favorites. We used you. We stole from you. And I am so profoundly, deeply sorry. You are a good man, Joshua. You always were. And I failed you." A single tear slipped down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was the final release of a 30-year emotional block. "Does Mom feel the same way?" I asked quietly. My dad let out a sad, pathetic sigh. "No. Your mother still blames everyone else. She blames you, she blames Elijah, she blames Jake, she blames the economy. She can't face what she did. It would break her." "I accept your apology, Dad," I said, "and I meant it. I forgive you for the past, but I cannot have you in my present. The boundary stays. For my own sanity, I can't be part of your life." "I know," he whispered. "I understand. I just needed you to know I was wrong. Have a good life, son." "You too, Dad." I hung up the phone. I didn't feel the need to call Sarah or Patricia to vent. I didn't feel angry. I just felt a profound, deep sense of closure. The ghost that had haunted my childhood was finally put to rest. Exactly 1 year after the miserable birthday that started this entire cascade, I turned 31. I didn't celebrate it alone in a dark apartment with a single, unlit cupcake. I celebrated it in the spacious living room of the beautiful, 3-bedroom townhouse I had just purchased in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. The kitchen island was covered in incredible food, the lights were bright, and the room was filled with loud, genuine laughter. Sarah was there, arguing playfully with Patricia about the best way to cook a brisket. Aunt Linda was sitting on my new sofa, showing Elijah embarrassing baby photos on her phone while he laughed and covered his face. My boss, Mr. Sterling, even stopped by for 20 minutes to drop off a bottle of incredibly expensive scotch before heading to a gala. I stood by the kitchen counter, holding a glass of wine, looking at the people filling my home. This was my family. It wasn't the family I was born into by genetic lottery, but it was the family I had actively chosen. The family I had built through mutual respect, loyalty, and shared struggles. Earlier that morning, I had checked my mailbox. There was a cheap, generic birthday card inside with no return address. I recognized my mother's slanted handwriting immediately. I opened it. Inside was a standard, pre-printed happy birthday message, and a personal check made out to me for $500. The exact amount I used to send them every single month. It was a pathetic, manipulative olive branch, a desperate attempt to buy back control. I didn't even feel a spike of anger. I just smiled, walked over to my paper shredder, and fed the check right into the metal teeth. I watched it turn into worthless confetti. I didn't need her money. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her at all. Looking back at the entire nightmare, I realized something fundamental about human nature. Sometimes, the absolute best revenge you can inflict on toxic people isn't revenge at all. It isn't screaming matches or lawsuits or trying to ruin their lives. The best revenge is simply walking away, building a spectacular, successful, peaceful life, and refusing to let them have access to it. It is looking in the mirror and knowing, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you are enough and you always were. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. It was a hard journey to recount, but it feels incredibly good to finally get it all out in the open. I hope this resonated with you in some way, especially if you are dealing with a difficult family dynamic of your own. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation where you had to cut ties to save yourself? Let me know your experiences down below. Before you go, I have a special request. If you are hearing my voice right now, it means you made it to the very end of this video. You are part of what I call the 1% Club. I want you to go into the comments and type the letter W. W stands for winner. It is our secret code, a sign for me to recognize the absolute best, most dedicated listeners in this community who stood by me through this entire journey. If my story helped you or if you just enjoyed the ride, please hit that like button and make sure you follow the channel. I have a lot more life experiences and stories to share with you all. Until next time, stay strong, protect your peace, and never let anyone make you feel like a backup